Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My dear children, today I will talk to you about the character of Banquo in William Shakespeare's play Macbeth. Now, as I told you that in my earlier lecture when I was talking about Lady Macbeth as the fourth witch in the play Macbeth, but here today I will talk to you about Banquo as a foil to Macbeth's character in the play Macbeth. Now, this play Macbeth is a most profound vision, most profound, in fact, and a most mature vision of evil. In fact, it is a battle between destruction and construction. And whatever you find in this particular play, Macbeth is regarded as the tragedy of ambition. It is regarded as the tragedy of damnation. And why this is regarded as a tragedy of ambition and damnation is simply because of the fault in the character of Macbeth. We all know that Macbeth was a very, very ambitious man. He was over ambitious. And after fighting the Battle of Norway, rather the battle at Fife, when he was fighting with the King of Norway from the side of King Duncan from Scotland, he won the battle. And after winning laurels, while he was coming back on his way, he met the witches. But he was not alone. Banquo was also there with him. And Banquo and Macbeth, first, let me tell you, were great friends. In fact, they were bosom friends, and both of them trusted each other, were loyal to each other, they had faith in each other, and they loved each other too. But while they were returning, they came across these three witches who all hailed Macbeth. And not only they hailed Macbeth, but when Banquo questioned them, they hailed Banquo also. First, they had hailed Macbeth as the Thane of Glamis, and then the Thane of Cador, and then hailing him as the king hereafter. That these were the three prophecies with which the witches had hailed Macbeth. So Banquo said, "When if you can look into the seeds of time and tell which one will grow and which will not, then why don't you speak for me, who neither begs nor fears your favors?" So he was also wanting to know, tell me something about my future also. So the witches had hailed him as not the king himself, but being the father of the kings. That means his son shall be the king. He will be not as great as Macbeth, but greater than Macbeth. And when Banquo hears these prophecies of the witches, he is very calm, quiet, and very subdued. And in a way, he is a little indifferent also to these prophecies. He just listens to them for a moment. He's exhilarated. For a moment, he feels happy. But then he realizes, well, these witches, how can you trust them? How can you have faith in the prophecies of these witches who neither know you and neither have any designs in forecasting your future? But whereas Macbeth was overtaken by the prophecies, in fact, already that seed was sown in the mind of Macbeth, and already he started calculating himself as the Thane of Cador because Glamis he was, and he was thinking, and more than being the Thane of Cador, he started thinking of himself as the king hereafter, thinking of himself as the king of Scotland, without realizing that King Duncan, who is the king of Scotland, is already alive. And King Duncan has loyal virtues with him. He's faithful, he's humble, he's loved by his kinsmen, by his subjects, and there is absolutely no need why people will try to dethrone Duncan and place Macbeth as the king. So he was all the time, calculating, and the very seed that was sown in his mind, and why it was sown, not because that the witches are responsible for the deed or the witches are responsible for the murder of King Duncan, but because Macbeth himself was overambitious. The fault was in Macbeth himself. And this fault led him to write a letter to Lady Macbeth, communicating to her about these three prophecies, and at the same time, giving her hopes of being the Queen of Scotland. So when Lady Macbeth had read the letter, she knew that Macbeth has a desire, but he does not have the will to do the deed. Whereas Banco, on the other hand, he was all the time morally right. He was overcautious. He was very discerning. And he said that, see, he had called these witches the midnight hags because they had met them in the night time, during the dark time, during darkness. And he said that these instruments of darkness, they win us with of honest trifles, and then they betray us in deepest consequences. That is, they play. I mean, Banco was the most practical man, the most reasonable person, who was able to judge, or rather he had a knowledge about the minds of these witches. He knew that how the witches can play upon the mind of the man, that can play and befool the psyche of the man, the conscience of the man. And that is why he was unperturbed and undisturbed, and he did not believe that whether my son Fleance is going to be the future king, or that I will be the father of many kings. He does not did not harbor this thought in his mind at all. And it was just lying dormant in his mind. But Macbeth, of course, it started brewing in his mind. And why you can say that Banco is a foil to Macbeth's character. Now, what do you mean by foil? Foil is meaning to say that the character is in contrast to the main protagonist, and with the help of his acting as a foil, he is able to reveal the characteristic traits of the protagonist, and Banco was able to reveal the characteristic traits of Macbeth's character. Because, see, both good and evil, they are in contrast to each other in this particular play, and Banco is someone who represents wisdom, who represents practical mind, who represents thoughtfulness, and at the same time, who is morally good on his grounds. Macbeth, on the other hand, was not a bad man. I wouldn't say that Macbeth was a bad man. Macbeth was very brave, and because of his bravery, he was able to win the battle. And of course, the scene which describes the battle, the second scene in the play, describes the battle which took place, and how Macbeth was able to score victory over by killing MacDonald and tearing him from top to toe and putting his head upon the pole in order to make it visible to the king, to the people of Scotland, how he has won the battle. And when the news of the victory went to King Duncan, Duncan was really full of pride for Macbeth, and at the same time Banco, because Banco was also, if Macbeth was a brave warrior, Banco was also a brave warrior. He has also given his best contributions in the battlegrounds. But here the problem is that the battle that is going on, this battle between the good and the evil is like a universal war, and the battlegrounds are the souls of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So, when this thought enters into the mind of Macbeth to kill Duncan, because without killing Duncan, without murdering him, he will not be able to secure the throne. He will not be able to fulfill his ambitions. And Lady Macbeth, the part that Lady Macbeth plays is she provokes. She says, "Unsex me here, fill me from top to toe, from with direst cruelty, and make thick my blood." That is what she says, so that she is able to infuse into the heart of Macbeth the will to do the deed. Of course, even after hearing Lady Macbeth, Macbeth is still has got that fear in his mind, and he says, "I will only dare to do what man dare to do, and this business I will not be able to do." And then when Lady Macbeth keeps on provoking and inciting him, but says, "Well, if that child is feeding on my breast, I will tear take away the mouth from my nipple and dash the brains out of that little child." I could be such a daring mother also, not only a woman, but a daring mother. So, after hearing the speeches of, the provocative speeches of Lady Macbeth, Macbeth had finally decided to do the deed, because Lady Macbeth had laid out the whole plan of how she is going to make the grooms overdrunk, and how when the grooms are lying asleep, Macbeth will enter the room and will kill King Duncan. And it will seem as if the deed has been done by those grooms only, and Macbeth is will escape from it. And later on, when the deed is discovered, and when the he Macbeth, now see how after the commitment of the first deed, Macbeth keeps on committing the other deeds. He kills the groom because they will be the first witness to deny the murder. They will not say that they have done the deed. And before they wake up and before they are able to confess and say the truth, Macbeth goes and murders them. So the first evil deed of Macbeth is done due to his ambition, but the rest of the other evil deeds that he commits, the murders that he does, that is the murder of the grooms, the murder of Banquo, and the murder of Macbeth's family, all is done out of fear and out of that feeling of insecurity. So he plans the murder of Banquo also. Why? Because he is afraid of Banquo's nature. Under him, my genius is rebuked, he says. He knows that Banquo, I mean, of course, Banquo was so faithful and loyal to him. Banquo was faithful to King Duncan. And Banquo, when Macbeth becomes the king, Banquo is faithful to Macbeth also. And now he treats Macbeth not as his friend, but as his king. And he is ready to perform all the duties that and carry on all the responsibilities which lie or are assigned to him as Macbeth's subject. And even though he doesn't say or he doesn't confess that he is going to reveal the secret because he suspects that Macbeth is the doer of the deed, but this guilty consciousness is grooming in the heart of Macbeth, and he says that you never know, you never can. I cannot trust his royal nature, the royal nature of Banquo, and a time may come when Banquo will be able to reveal the truth. So he plans the murder. And now, since he has become the king, naturally, he himself cannot go out and do the deed. So he calls in the professional murderers to do the deed. And see how, when he's talking to those professional murderers, what a smooth like he talks like the smooth talking that he does with with those murderers, inciting them to commit the deed and making them realize that they are doing and they will do this deed not for the sake of money, but because out of hatred for Banquo. So he makes them realize that their state of affairs and their underprivileged state is because of Banco only and not because of him. And therefore, in the commitment of the murder of Banco, they will be uplifted and they will be benefited both monetarily and with power also. So the murderers decide to do the deed, and he at the same time very slyly says that not only Banco, you have to kill not only Banco, but you have to do away with Fleance also, because he has a fear that if the witch's prophecies have turned out to be the truth for him by making him the king or by his being a king, then Fleance in future can also be the future king. Because if Banco will not be the king, of course his son can be the future king. So he orders those professional murderers to commit the deed. But when the professional murderers plan out to do the deed, they are successful in killing Banquo, but Fleance escapes. And when Fleance escapes, naturally, these professional murderers come back to Macbeth. During the coronation ceremony, which takes place in Scone, these professional murderers come and relate the whole incident of how they have been successful in murdering Banquo and how Fleance has escaped. Now, in that coronation ceremony, what happens is when the crowning ceremony is taking place and all the subjects are seated royally in their place according to the order, that is, according to their particular ranks, Macbeth, announces or does a toast for the good health of the public and good health of the subjects. But while he's trying to toast that, at that very moment, the ghost of Banquo appears. So, this ghost is representative of the guilt that is there in the mind of Macbeth. the evil that is there in the mind of Macbeth. Because no matter how much power Macbeth is able to accrue for himself, but he will not be able to go away, or he cannot do away with the past, isn't it? With his past, with his guilt consciousness. He has to face his guilt consciousness. And, his mind becomes disturbed, and he says, now I am cabin cribbed and confined to saucy doubts and fear. And he tells the ghost, don't shake your gory locks at me, isn't it? And speak. If you can sit there and shake your gory locks at me, then speak to me also. So when he's talking to the ghost, naturally the ghost is visible only to Macbeth and to nobody else. And because the ghost is in a way a conscious reminder to Macbeth of his guilt. And at that time, Lady Macbeth has to intervene, and she dismisses the meeting at once by telling them all to leave the place, and wishes them, and at the same time admonishes them from not asking a question to Macbeth, because if they question him, naturally this will enrage him, this will upset him, and he will feel more deranged, mentally deranged. So the public leaves without putting the question, but it puts suspicion in the minds of the subject, who cannot speak out or say something, whatever they surmise from the actions of Macbeth. And in this coronation ceremony, even Macduff had denied to attend this feast, because Macduff suspects Macbeth in the doing of the deed. And when Macbeth does not find Macduff in the ceremony, he orders for the murder or the execution of Macduff. But Macduff was clever. He had already left Scotland. He had gone to England to join hands with Malcolm, the elder son of King Duncan, so that both of them can contrive a battle against Macbeth and do away with the harms that Macbeth is doing to the country and save their country. So, when he comes to learn that Macbeth has left Scotland, he orders for the execution of the family of Macduff. So, his wife and his children are killed and massacred. So, see how ruthless he becomes. Now, after the commitment of the deed of the murder of King Duncan, he does not take the help of Lady Macbeth at all. And in fact, he does the planning himself. Lady Macbeth regrets this, because now she realizes that she is no longer the loyal wife of Macbeth, because Macbeth does not share his thoughts, his attitudes, his feelings, his actions with her. So, that sleepwalking scene in Act 5, Scene 1, when Lady Macbeth is suffering from somnambulism, she can see blood on her hands constantly, which she cannot wipe out. So, blood is not on her hands, but blood is on her mind. And she regrets, in a way, that why she had promoted Macbeth in the doing of the deed. So, Banquo, you can say, was a character who was truthful and loyal to Macbeth, to King Duncan, but how Macbeth failed him due to his over ambitiousness. And why he committed, he did not, stop himself from committing the murder of Banquo, simply because he wanted to safeguard his own security, his own self. He wanted to run away from his guilty consciousness, without realizing that one cannot run away from one's past. So, if you are able, or if you try to destroy life, as Macbeth had tried to do in this particular play, by beginning with the destruction of King Duncan and then carrying on with the murder of Banquo, he did not realize that with destruction, of course, life is like a tale told by an idiot. It is full of sound of fury, signifying nothing. And this is what was there in the life of Macbeth. And that is why, in the end, he realizes that I am at the seer of my age, and I am realizing now that the candle of my life is nearly coming to an end, and I have not gained anything good in my life. So that is why Banquo is regarded, being a true friend of Macbeth, is regarded as a foil to the character of Macbeth. I hope you've understood it. Thank you so much.